Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I am sharing my top 10 tips for planning the perfect Ghanaian wedding. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so below. I'll wait. Are you subscribed? Okay, let's continue. So before I share my tips with you, the one thing I want you to understand if you're bride-to-be watching this is that there is no perfect wedding. If you are able to accomplish 90% of the things on your checklist or your wish list throughout the wedding, you have had a perfect wedding. Okay, so tip number 1. Choose your wedding date and choose it early. A lot of the vendors that you will approach during your wedding planning process will ask you the number 1 question, what is your wedding date? If you don't have a wedding date, a lot of wedding professionals will not take you seriously. You need your wedding date to book your venue as well, which is the number 1 thing that you probably need to do in your wedding planning process. The type of wedding you even have will be directly impacted by the date of your wedding. So for instance, if you wanted to host a garden wedding, you probably don't want to set your date on the 1st of May as an example, because it is the rainy season. If you wanted to use a ballroom, that gives you a bit more flexibility. One of the reasons why you want to choose your wedding date first as well is so that you can inform all of your families. In Ghana, we take our families and their participation in our wedding seriously. So if your parents don't know your wedding date, you probably are planning for fail. Tip number 2, keep it organized. I personally recommend putting together a wedding binder or a wedding checklist booklet, which includes all of the things that you need to think about and decide with your fiancé before your wedding. It is critical that you do this because as a bride-to-be myself, I easily got distracted by certain things I saw on the internet or certain things people would say. And eventually you will find that you have so many things in your head which nobody else knows but you. If you want to approach your wedding planner with your wedding ideas, it is best again to have some form of an inspiration board or binder. If you don't have one, ask your wedding planner to help you with that as soon as possible so that you have everything in one place. One of the things you want to keep in that binder is your wedding planning checklist from 12 months, 9 months down, 6 months down, right up to the day of the wedding and what you need to think about and what you need to plan for. One of the things you also want to have in that wedding binder is your photography checklist, your guest checklist, and of course your budget. You need to keep track of your budget so that you don't forget what it is that you want to focus on and overspend. That leads me into point number 3. Decide on your wedding budget and stick to it. A lot of the times when we first start planning our wedding, we get overly excited. I know because I have been there. We get overly excited and start comparing our wedding and start dreaming about what we see on Bella Niger and Wedding Some Point and all of those wedding websites and get carried away by all of the things that we see and eventually lose track. You want to be able to set a specific figure for your wedding. Of course, there is some flexibility allowed when you can't find a specific vendor you want, or perhaps the wedding dress you want eventually falls a little out of budget. But sticking to that budget will help you and your fiancé stay sane. Point number 4, decide on the type of wedding and the size of wedding you want. The type or size of wedding you want will directly influence how much you eventually spend on that wedding and your budget. So as an example, if you wanted to host 100 people intimately at home for your traditional wedding, the cost of that wedding would be entirely different from if you decided to host a destination wedding here in Ghana in a 5-star hotel or resort for 500 guests. Some of the questions you need to ask yourself during this process is, how many guests do I want at my wedding? What type of food do I want them to eat? Is it going to be a cocktail? Is it going to be a sit-down reception? Is it going to be wherever I live or around wherever I live? Or is it going to be a destination wedding? All of these questions will influence the type and size of wedding that you eventually have. So think about this carefully, because that has a direct influence on how much you eventually spend on your wedding. My point number 5, decide on who you want in your bridal team, not just on looks, but on personality. A lot of the times when we are planning who should be in our bridal party, we often fall for who is going to look best in my wedding photos, who's the best slay queen. Well, that probably wouldn't be the best way to choose who should be in your bridal party. Weddings are generally stressful, even for us professionals. So you want to keep people around you who are as enthusiastic as you, people who are as excited about your wedding, and people who naturally give off a good vibe. Otherwise, you will find that based off of looks alone, you have people around you who really aren't interested in being there. And that has an influence on your mood, and that ripples out to how everyone feels around you on your wedding day. My point number 6. Delegate, delegate, delegate. A wedding involves so many moving parts that you want to find friends and family who are willing to step in and give you a hand along the way. Don't be like me and want to do everything by yourself. Otherwise, you're going to get wedding planning burnout. Find people who are really organized and know how to put things together well, and assign different tasks to them. So you can have somebody track your wedding budget as an example. You can have somebody check on your wedding stationery. You can have somebody else check on other vendors like caterers, videographers, photographers, instead of trying to meet everyone yourself and try to coordinate everyone by yourself. And that leads me to my point number 7. Hire at least a day of coordinator. If you don't have friends and family you can trust to be responsible with your checklist or trust with different tasks, hire at least a day of coordinator. That means that you can put everything together by yourself, but on the day of your wedding, well, a wedding coordinator won't really meet you on the day of your wedding. They usually will meet you about 3 to 4 weeks before your wedding. And you will transfer that blueprint or that binder to your wedding day of coordinator, and they will be in charge of contacting all of your vendors to ensure that they understand their roles and responsibilities. They will look through all of your contracts and identify any loopholes of what ifs. They will be present on the wedding day to also coordinate all of the different moving parts so that you can relax and take all of those beautiful photos you hope to be able to take. My point number 8, choose your wedding vendors carefully. Do not select wedding vendors based off of Instagram popularity or social media popularity. It's so easy to fall for the 1,000 followers or the 50,000 follower count vendor. Be very careful in selecting, because what you see online can be very different from the reality of it all. So make sure you go out to individually meet all of your wedding vendors, have a feel of their personality. You will need to see even if your personalities are a good match. Photographers, makeup artists, videographers are all in your personal space a lot on your wedding day. So you need to ensure that you actually like these people before you hire them to be a part of your wedding day. Read the contracts, make sure it includes all of the what ifs, and make sure that they have a backup plan should anything go wrong. And that leads me directly into point number 9. When you're hiring your wedding vendors, make sure that everything you are paying for has a detailed services contract. Before you put down any deposit, no matter how small, make sure that you sign a contract with your wedding vendor. Don't go to a caterer as an example and say, well, I want to feed 100 people. They give you a menu and you just pay a deposit. No, make sure that you get everything in writing so that if anything, well, hopefully nothing goes wrong, but if anything was to go wrong or if there are any delays, you have something in writing to come back and make people accountable for it. My final point, be sure to put together a day off wedding checklist. Hopefully you'll be able to hire a wedding planner who will take care of all of those details for you. If you do not have a wedding planner, be sure to look online and see day off checklist. Make sure you schedule some alone time for yourself on the morning of your wedding. Make sure your wedding day time list includes things like taking photographs by yourself with your fiancé after the ceremony, in between the ceremony and the reception. Make sure that you schedule time for photographs of your decor. A lot of the times we spend so much money on all of these decor, event design props, and we don't even get to see it because by the time we walk into the reception, it's full of your guests. Make sure you schedule all of these things on your wedding day timeline and make sure that in your timeline is time for you to spend alone with your fiancé in between the ceremony and the reception to get your breath back so that you can enter your reception and have a beautiful party. Bonus point, don't be so critical of yourself and of everything that happens on the wedding. The point of you getting married is to stay married. You're married, that's all that matters. Don't worry so much about the little 6-inch gap in the drapery. Don't worry so much about whether the charger plates are all lined up perfectly. Walk in, forget these tiny things and enjoy your day. I hope that you find these tips useful. If this is the first time you are watching any of my YouTube videos, remember to hit the subscribe button below and let's stay connected. I look forward to seeing you again next week, same time.